done with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent, you won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.
Good evening and welcome to the Belfast Bobcast. Tonight's conversation is about sovereignty, what it is, what it isn't, and where responsibility truly begins. So my guest is Russell Paul Arthur. He's the founder of the Grace Private Society and the Grace Sovereignty Academy. Russell argues that modern life has been quietly captured by the state and corporate systems and governed through consent most people never knowingly gave. His work claims to offer a lawful, peaceful pathway out of public jurisdiction and into what he calls the private domain, a model of personal sovereignty grounded in private law, trusts, and self-governance. The conversation matters because many people today feel suffocated by bureaucracy, economic pressure, and systems they no longer trust. Russell's work speaks directly to that frustration. At the same time, I approach sovereignty from a slightly different angle. I hold that responsibility precedes rights, and order precedes freedom, and that no paperwork can absolve a man from consequence. I'm skeptical of what I call theatrical sovereignty, the idea that someone can be claimed without moral weight or accountability. So this is not a debate and it's not a sales pitch, it's an inquiry. We'll explore what sovereignty actually means, how Russell's system works in real life, where law ends and conscience begins. So whether true freedom is something you declare or something that you live. So Russell, welcome to the Belfast Bobcast.
Hello, Mark. A very good evening. How are you?
Yes, not too bad at all. So a bit of a long introduction, but just to sort of state where both of us sit, and we'll get stuck in. So let me see, just get to the first question here. So defining sovereignty versus citizenship. So your mission encourages individuals to transition from citizenship to sovereignty to restore their lives. In your view, what does it mean to be a sovereign man or woman as opposed to a citizen? How do you define personal sovereignty in practical terms? And in what key ways does the life of a sovereign differ from the life of an ordinary citizen under state authority?
Okay, great question. So let's define where sovereignty is different to citizenship. So with citizenship, you are a registered member of a nation state. You are part of a community within a country, and you are operating within a venue and jurisdiction, which is under the authority and control of the nation state and its administrative arm, the government. So the government will dictate the terms of your life through every legislated act, statute, rule, regulation, and public policy that is issued directly from the government or a public agency. So every aspect of your life, whether it be running a business, driving a vehicle, to engaging with public services, will be under some type of rule or regulation where you as a citizen are completely responsible and liable for the terms in which you associate or contract with that organization or individual within what we define as a public domain. Because as a citizen, a registered citizen of the state, you are operating in the venue and jurisdiction of a public domain, which is pretty much controlled by public policy. So where sovereignty is different is sovereignty is a severance and a separation from citizenship. So rather than being under the authority of, say, a crown or a nation state and its government, you are establishing freedom and independence to operate within your own private law and within your own venue and jurisdiction, which we define as a private domain. So there's a difference here. We have citizenship, where you operate as a citizen within a public domain, which is controlled by the Crown and the nation state. And then we have sovereignty, where you transition into a private domain and operate under your own private law. And that private law is defined by yourself in accordance with your free will and conscience.
So
However, sorry, go
some
on.
in the private domain, then how do they interact in the public domain to get a job, etc.?
Yeah, so this is the crucial part. This is the crucial part. Of course, becoming sovereign and operating within your own private domain does not exclude you from the everyday life within society, because you very much need to engage with the public domain in order to access public services. So what we do is we restructure our life and our estate, which is the entire wealth of everything that we accumulate within our life, everything that we earn, own, and owe as a citizen, and we restructure everything into private trusts. And then what we do is we interface with the public domain, we interface with public services and public agencies through private trusts, where these private trusts secure the equity and rights of our life, and where any personal liability is attached to trustees in the matter. So, for example, if I'm a sovereign man and I'm operating in my own private domain with my own private law, but I need to engage with a public agency to receive a public service, then I will form a private trust arrangement with that service, and I would appoint the public agency as the trustees in the matter. And the reason I would do that is because the equitable interests of our life and estate, each one of us within the United Kingdom, is secured by HM Treasury, who are the administrators of the public domain, of the equitable interest of the public domain. So therefore, if we're going to engage with the public domain and the public agencies, then we need to do it through HM Treasury, and we need to do it using private trusts. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. What the skeptic might say is that you are sort of wanting to take the good parts and of what citizenship offers, and do away with the responsibilities of it.
Yeah, that's something I hear quite a lot myself, and that couldn't be further from the truth, because from my perspective and from how my organization deals with sovereignty, is that as a sovereign man or sovereign woman, you are the exemplar of law. So you are operating in the highest laws of the land, which would be private contract law, trust law, estate law, property law, and the law of equity, which is complete honor and justice when it comes to dealing with equity and property, whether it be in a public domain or in the private domain. So what we're not actually doing is we're not actually shirking any responsibility or liability. We're just containing everything into private trust arrangements. And the reason we're doing that is because at the moment, if you are a registered citizen within the public domain, then your life and estate is actually contained in a public trust arrangement with the Crown and State, and where the Crown and State have taken the default position of being the executors of your life and estate. Hence why they can attach any rule or regulation or public policy to your life and estate to control your life and estate in the public domain. So what we're doing is we're taking back, we're not shirking off responsibility and we're not shirking off liability. We are being the exemplars of law, but all we're doing is we're taking back control of our life and estate, and we're placing it into a new private domain that we control of our own private law. But at the same time, when we interact with public agencies in the public domain, we still need to respect any venues and jurisdictions that we are dealing with. So, for example, if as a sovereign man, I'm operating with my own private law and my own private domain, but I still need to operate a business in a public domain, then I need to form a corporation, right, which needs to be registered with the Crown and State. And if I do that, then whatever corporate laws are attached to that corporation, I need to abide by those corporate laws, but they are contained within a private trust. Yeah. So the responsibility and the liability is still there. We're not trying to get away with anything. We're not trying to have one over on the system. We're trying to be honourable, responsible, and liable people for our actions. But the only difference is that we want to take back control of our life and estate.
So many people believe that responsibility must come before rights, and the true freedom is earned by shouldering obligation. So, in your sovereign model, what is the role of personal responsibility? Do you teach that certain duties or moral standards must be upheld by those claiming sovereign rights? In other words, how do responsibility rights relate to in your system, and sovereign rights contingent on one's responsible conduct, or are they inherent and unconditional?
Okay, so let's get into the subject of rights then, because each individual has their own rights, and those rights are defined by the individual's own personal conscience, and also whatever emotional state that individual happens to be in whenever they're going about their daily life, and conducting themselves within a greater society. And then we have the rights of an individual which have been defined by, say, the Crown and the state and the government. So there's obviously an overlay and there's an overlap when it comes to operating within a society of where your rights begin, end, and where somebody else's rights start and proceed forward. So when it comes to rights, we obviously have natural and inherent rights as an individual to use our own free will to make our own choices. But it all comes down to a very basic principle when operating within any society, whether that be a public society or a private society, and that is to express your natural and inherent freedoms and rights to do what you need to do to live your life and express yourself. But at the same time, you must honour and respect other people's rights in context of the society or the organisation that you're dealing within. Okay, so rights and responsibilities, it all comes down to what the rights are that you're claiming or expressing or living by, to the degree of responsibility that you have towards those rights. But they go together. Yeah, they're a pair, rights and responsibilities. You cannot exercise rights without responsibility, and you must take responsibility for whatever rights that you claim and you exercise. So no one is able to function in any society, I don't think, without taking full responsibility for their actions. You have
So,
to.
as a sovereign citizen, you would still be liable for, committing an offence or whatever.
So if you and I want to make a clear distinction here, if it's okay, Mark, I want to make a clear distinction between sovereign and citizen, because you can't be, from my perspective of what I understand about lawyers, you can't be a sovereign citizen because it's kind of an oxymoron. You can either be a sovereign or a citizen, right? Because a citizen is under the authority of another authority, and then a sovereign is freedom and independence. But in terms of a sovereign operating within a public domain, if you are operating in a public domain and if you've committed some type of crime against another human, then of course you are responsible, and of course you are liable, and of course you're going to be subject to any criminal laws. Because the moment you commit that act, then you've actually put yourself in the venue and jurisdiction of whatever law defines that act. And of course we have criminal law because we as a society, as we've gone through generations of time, have decided that crime is not a good thing for any society, and obviously we need to have laws in place that deals with crime. So when it comes to things like crime law, committing crimes, we completely honour and respect that ourselves, not only in a public domain, but in our own private society. When it comes to commercial laws, corporate laws, when it comes to financial laws, any laws regarding any aspect of life, which are laws that protect order, safety, provide stability for a society to function, then of course we honour and respect those laws. But where we differ as sovereigns is that we're taking a very conscientious view of particular laws that don't make any sense, that aren't reasonable, that aren't fair, that aren't right, that are severe with punishment and penalty. And we're deciding that we're actually, as a society within our own private law, will obviously honour and uphold the foundational laws of any society that have been functioning for many, many centuries, but will also evolve and adapt other laws that are more beneficial, more suitable to honour the life of a human being. So that answers your question.
You're preaching to the converted as far as overreach goes. I was arrested 3 times in a month for Facebook posts. Right. So, I get government overreach. And critics would argue, me being one of the critics, that sovereignty cannot be achieved merely by filing paperwork or changing legal status. Rather, authority begins within a person. How do you respond to the idea that true authority and freedom come from personal character, conscience, and spiritual orientation rather than from documents or court filings?
Absolutely 100% on board with that. Everything begins within. So anyone that comes into our society must have a certain degree of life experience, of knowledge, and of practical experience in exercising laws within a particular contents aspect of life, where that person is able to conduct themselves in a manner where they are operating fully aware of what they're doing and with due diligence in every aspect of their life and estate. So, for example, if you think that you are going to write some sort of a declaration of status to declare that you're no longer a citizen, and then just send that declaration off and that's it, done, you're a sovereign, then that couldn't be further from what we do. That's just not going to work at all. So, for example, anyone that files a declaration of status within our organisation, they have to spend months of studying the document. We have a 100-page document, which is a declaration of status. They have to spend months studying that document. We have to do reviews and interviews with the person to make sure that they fully understand everything that's stated inside that document. They have to integrate the words of the document. They have to embody the words within themselves so that they stand by every term and every word stated in the document. And that process of studying, reviewing, and integrating the documents is the evolution of the person's psychology and consciousness, where they get to a state where they can hold a sovereign position, which is a position of integrity and honor when dealing with any particular society in any particular venue and jurisdiction. So I agree that you cannot establish, claim, and assert sovereignty just by expressing a document alone. You have to become sovereign. You have to.
In courts, for example, in that setting, I have found that just conducting myself in such a way that I'm clearly not governed by that court has got me much better results than anything else. You know, that they know when I'm in there that they don't have jurisdiction over me spiritually or emotionally or mentally, because they don't. You know, so I've found that actually does affect the outcome.
It does, yeah. If you, let's talk to that court setting, for example. If you walk into any public court system, if you have foundational knowledge on how courts actually work, if you have foundational law and specific laws on how to establish your venue and jurisdiction within a court, then you can take a position of being someone that is speaking with sovereign authority, and you can operate within your own venue and jurisdiction within a court. We do a thing which is called a special appearance. So you can go to a public court under special appearance and you can challenge or establish venue and jurisdiction. However,
is that part of the 12 assumptions of law?
Yeah, the assumptions of law, yeah. Okay. And that's
No,
something
that's
that you
great.
personally dealt
No,
with and had experience with?
well, it's not something I personally dealt with. The only thing I would do is just demeanor. There's nothing I say in particular. It's clear to look at me when I'm in court that I'm not really worried of their outcome. So that does actually inevitably help the outcome, I find, because they expect you to be in a fear state and to be, on edge. But it's it's just another day, isn't it? So
Yeah, it is. The public court systems are completely geared up to function within a venue and jurisdiction that has complete and paramount authority over all the citizens of the state. So the judge within a public court is obviously a representative and an extension of the state. And when you go into a public court as a sovereign, the first thing you must establish is the fact that you are no longer a citizen that's operating within their venue and jurisdiction. And what we do within our organisation is, these are not just words that come out of our mouth or a position that we state within a court. This is something that we go through a lawful procedure by sending a declaration of status, which is an actual lawful procedure to sever and separate from the citizen. And we've got our own private court within our society where we seal it all, stamp it all, and it's like we're communicating between two different venues and jurisdictions. But one thing that we teach within our society is to take the peaceful approach, because one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to get into a situation where we're always challenging, always provoking the public authorities whenever there's a problem or an issue, and where we're always getting into controversy and conflict, because the last place that we want to end up is a court. The court is the last place that anyone should want to end up, and we really ideally want to settle all matters before they get to the point of a court. So our whole foundational work in helping people transition from citizenship to sovereignty is how they can actually restructure the venue and jurisdiction of their life and estate, so that if there's any public matters, they can be dealt with without having to step into a public court. They can be dealt with outside of a court, and they can be dealt with in a peaceful and lawful manner.
So you have established the Grace Private Court, to safeguard against unalienable and inherent freedoms and rights of members. So how does this private justice system function in practice if a member of Grace has a dispute or is accused of wrongdoing, either by another member or by somebody outside authority? How is it handled? So, for example, if a member were to violate someone's rights or break a law, would there be legal consequences under your setup, or how would they be enforced? Or
Yes, of course. So let's talk about this in two aspects. So we've got our private court dealing with public matters outside of our private society, and then we've got our private court dealing with matters within our private society. So let's deal with the public matters first. So let's say, for example, someone has become a member of our private society. They've established their personal sovereignty within our society by going through our academy, and they've also become part of our private court, because each member of our society establishes a sovereign court record. So all the documents that they would create to restructure the equity and rights of their life and estate into a private domain and sovereign structure all gets recorded in our court. So we have a court archives, a record of everything that they've done, documented and witnessed by the court itself. Now, should there ever be a public matter where there is a dispute over the equity and rights of one of our members' life and estate, where a claim is being made by a public agency or a public authority, then we can provide the documented paperwork to prove that our private member is no longer a citizen of the Crown Estate, and where they no longer have venue and jurisdiction to stick that claim. However, if there is a public matter where one of our members has stepped into a venue and jurisdiction within the public domain, and they have transgressed, they have trespassed against and violated a law, then we will seek to deal with that matter within our own private court and deal with it in exclusive equity. Okay, so we would use the law of equity and the maxims of equity to deal with the matter. And the law of equity, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the law of equity, Mark, is the law of laws. Are you familiar with the law of equity?
Briefly, and I wouldn't know it in great detail, no.
Yeah, so you've got the highest laws of the land. So you've got contract law, you've got trust law, you've got estate law, and you've got property law, and then you've got the basis law, which is the common law, which is a very, very old law going way, way back thousands of years. And then you've got the law of equity, which was brought into effect to deal with any laws that are too rigid and too unfair in their function or too limited to define a particular matter in law. So the law of equity comes along to provide fairness, to provide remedy, to correct a right, to right a wrong, or to provide remedy where there has been a deception or fraud in law. So the law of equity follows any other law. Yeah, so the equity in the matter is always discussed. So, for example, if there is a public matter and we have a member that's dealing with a public agency and that matter needs to be dealt with, then we would exercise the venue and jurisdiction of equity. We would bring that forward into the private court, and we would go through the process of dealing in the matter in equity, where the equity of the situation is taken to full account. If the private member has actually caused harm, injury, damages, and losses to another human being, no matter what venue and jurisdiction they're in, no matter what society they're part of, then of course our member is liable, because our member is operating in the law of equity, and they must provide. There must be justice in the situation, and the situation must be settled in accordance with equity, doing what is the right thing to resolve the situation and restore justice. And then we have our private members operating within our society, dealing with any private law matters that are outside of the public venue and jurisdiction. So all those matters get dealt with within a private court. Because our private court is not locational, we don't have physical buildings somewhere, it's all done online. Yeah. So what we would do is we would have a judge presiding over the court hearing or the court case online. And then we would have the sovereign man or woman come forward, and then they would state the proceedings, the claim, the hearing, whatever it is they want to bring forward into the court. And they would do it as a sovereign authority, because the sovereign man or woman is someone who is knowledgeable in the laws and who has decided to honor the laws and who has decided to be responsible and liable for the law. So it's the actual sovereign that is actually the judge and jury of their own life and estate. And it's the judges within the court process that are guiding the sovereign through the actual procedure to make sure that everything's being conducted within the parameters of the law and within the parameters of the law of equity, to ensure there is fairness and justice.
So 2 questions. If I was Joe Bloggs, not committing any crimes, working a normal 9 to 5, why would I want to become sovereign? And number 2, do you not fear sometimes that you're just recreating the system that you're stepping away from?
Yeah, great questions. So why would, let's say, an ordinary person want to become sovereign? The ordinary person would want to become sovereign because they have become disenfranchised and disillusioned with the current society that they're operating within. So they have had a certain amount of life experience and gained a certain amount of knowledge where they've come to an understanding of how the current society that they live within as a citizen operates. And perhaps they have discovered a few aspects of society that they're not happy with, whether that be the national health system, whether that be the banking and monetary system, whether that be with the way the government and the politicians are administrating the state, various other different aspects of life within the society that they're not happy with, and they're looking for an alternative. They're looking for perhaps a way to get out of the system. Perhaps they're looking for a way to get
But this
into a.
person is not getting attacked by this. I'm saying this is just a normal 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Now, you know, the system doesn't really impreach on his life. I'm sure he's had a few parking tickets or whatever, but you know what is it? You know, what's the eureka moment? Why should there be a concern about being sovereign or being not if you are just living life normally? If that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Well, this comes down to pain and pleasure, doesn't it? Because if there's an ordinary person living an ordinary life and they're absolutely happy with their life, then they've got absolutely no reason to become sovereign. They've got no reason to go on a journey or a transition into sovereignty, because the
So,
transition, yeah,
what was
because the
spoken
transition,
at you?
yeah, so the transition in sovereignty really is only for people who have reached a certain state of consciousness, a certain state of experience in life, and a certain level of, let's say, for lack of a better word, awakening to what's really going on in this world. Because unfortunately, I'm not sure what your view is on this. We do live within a world that is very deceptive, and there is a lot of corruption going on in different aspects of life and society. And there are the people that, let's put it this way, the people that are attracted to my organization are people that are very up to speed with what's going on. So if I'm going to be completely honest with you, there is no reason for an ordinary person to leave the illusion that they're currently in, or the bubble, or the lifestyle that they're currently living, if they're completely happy and they've got no problems with life and they've not experienced any major pains or traumas or awakening events.
Personally, I
Yeah.
admire it. So there's the likes of yourself, and then I'm not sure if you're aware of Kevin Annett, who um, he's an Australian, a Canadian guy who is very much into sovereign, and he's been. I think he's behind the creation of Albion, which is apparently a group of sovereigns in the United Kingdom who have set up their own uh, society, I guess,
Right.
named
Yes.
Albion. Now, I have great respect for this, but my thing is, because I see the corruption also. Um, I guess I'm not naive enough to think that setting up a system within a system is going to stop the system. You know,
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to make this distinction that as a private society, let's talk about what we're doing. We're not looking to create a system within a system. We're looking to create new structures and systems outside of the current system,
but
if that makes
how is
sense.
that even possible though? Because at any intersection in life, you're going to be interacting in that citizen role, whether you're sovereign individually or not. You know, if you enter a shop, you're dealing with commerce. If you enter a job role, you're dealing with a contractual. You know, you're dealing with a company that you're contracted to act in a certain way, adhere to certain time. You know, you're still you've got all the non benefits of being a citizen still there. So you know, it is a system within a system unless you have your own plot of land, really.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get your point. So let's talk about what we do within our Sovereignty Academy. We have a module within our master course which is called Private Land Claim. So we teach our members how to execute a private land claim to lawfully, peacefully, and formally claim the land underneath their home. Because within the current system, as a citizen, you don't actually own the land underneath your house, and you have a property title, okay, and deeds to the property, which is nothing to do with the actual land itself. So you have freehold or leasehold, we call it, because you're holding a status and standing on, for lack of a better word, let's call it crown land, or land that's governed by the venue and jurisdiction of the state and HM Treasury, etc. So that land and those property titles that a citizen would hold, they hold as a trustee in a public trust arrangement. All right. So even the property titles that they hold, that people think they have ownership to a property, they don't. They have ownership rights. They have the rights to use, hold, enjoy, sell, and profit from the property, and are trustees in the matter. So when you become sovereign, you are no longer positioned as a trustee in any matter, but instead you become a living beneficiary of your life and estate, as opposed to a citizen that operates as a legal person within the venue and jurisdiction of the Crown and State, that operates as a legal trustee in all public matters. But as a living beneficiary, as a living man, and not as a citizen or a legal person or a public persona, which is a fiction in law, but as a living man stands on the land, you can exercise your sovereign free will to execute a private land claim to hold that land as a living man and a living beneficiary, rather than be a tenant on the land as a registered citizen who's a tenant of the Crown, because the Crown have put a claim to your property sitting on the land through the property title, if that makes sense. And that's Mark, that's how we're able to start to establish our private estate and private domain on the land.
So the state of citizenship has came about since the 1666 Escovy Act, where we were all assumed dead or lost at sea until such times as we informed otherwise.
Yes, I'm very much aware of those acts. I've done a lot of study on those acts myself, but within the teachings of our society, we don't emphasize those acts too much in any documents or any statements or any positions that we take, because if you approach any government agency and start claiming the Cestui Act and the Cestui Trust, etc., they all deny it. They all deny that it's still in operation, it's still functioning. They say that it's all been repealed and it's no longer functioning, and it's been replaced with a different legislated act. So we don't put too much emphasis on that, and we don't use that particular law.
No, but I'm just saying that's where the current state of citizenship has spawned from, that particular act, where we were.
Yeah.
They
said anyone that's lost at sea and hasn't returned, then the life and estate gets absorbed by the actual nation state and the government, who become the default executors. Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, on a philosophical level, I'm with you, 100%. It's just in a practical life terms, it's a lot of effort for not much change, in my opinion.
Yeah, make no mistake in it. And I'm completely upfront and honest with people from the very start, before they even think about it. For us to help someone transition from citizenship to sovereignty, it's just under 2 years that they have to commit to the studying of sovereignty, studying of all the law, studying of the process, and integrating all the information before they can start executing the lawful procedures to make it happen. And it's a huge investment. So the question is, what are we getting out of this investment? Well, there's two crucial things that we're getting out of this investment, and it's taking back control of our life from any governments or agencies that act with a dishonor, that abuse the laws, that do overreach. And let's look at an example of that. An example of that would be the digital ID, right?
Yep.
So they want to bring out this digital ID, and they want everyone to sign up to the ultimate system of surveillance and control, where your entire life is connected to a digital avatar, where they can track and monitor everything that you're doing. And of course, you're linked to a social crediting system. And if you don't behave exactly how they want you to behave, then obviously they can just click off the switch and cut you out of most things in society. It's an absolute dystopian nightmare when you start to look into all the documents. So we've looked at that and gone, right, okay, so you've got a digital ID. How do we deal with that as a sovereign? Because if you're a citizen and you sign up for the digital ID, you go straight into that system and that's it. Forget it. You no longer have freedoms and rights. you have privileges that are defined by a social crediting system. Are you aware of the digital ID and how it's designed to function?
Yeah, very much so
Yeah,
as well. It's basically what China's running currently.
a nightmare. Have you seen the documents on that? It looks absolutely awful. It really
And
does.
it's Tony Blair's son is heading the company that's running it out, rolling it out as well.
Of course. So what we've done, yeah, or what we are, sorry, in the process of creating is a digital ID private trust. So what we would do is we would come forward as a sovereign man or woman. We would express and create a private trust, and we would claim the digital ID, and we would claim the digital data that is being held by the digital ID agency, whoever that's going to be. And we would place that into a private trust where it becomes private property of the trust, and where the terms of the trust becomes the private law that defines the use of the digital ID and its data. And this means the digital ID and the digital data that is currently being held by the public agency is protected by trust law, which means the digital ID agency that controls the digital data cannot do anything that deviates from or violates the terms of the trust. And by the way, the terms of the trust are terms that we define as a private law, as a sovereign. And of course, these terms are fair and they're equitable and they're upheld by various different laws. We would then send that trust over to the public agency that's dealing with the digital ID, and then we would appoint them as trustees in the matter. And as trustees in the matter, they would be responsible and liable for managing the digital ID for and on our behalf as the living beneficiary of the trust. And this means if the digital ID agency were to do anything to violate our natural and inherent freedoms and rights as a human being, or to violate any terms of the trust, then that public agency can be held accountable in accordance with trust law and the law of equity, not only in their own private court, but also in a public court setting. And what that's done is that's protected our freedoms and rights from a government that's trying to institute these schemes and these projects that are taking away more freedoms and more rights of people within society. Does that make sense?
It does, but it's very much in theory, isn't it? I mean, you haven't done it yet, have you?
Yeah, we have. I've done it myself. We've got members within our society that have already done it. But what it's
But are you're
done,
relying on the honesty of these government bodies that they're going to adhere to the trustee
yeah,
private laws? You know, that's a big leap of faith for a system that you're wanting to get away from.
yeah, again, I've got to be very upfront and clear with you. It's done on the basis of non-response and ignorance of law. So, for example, when we express a private trust to a public agency, they don't acknowledge the trust. They don't respond to the trust, or they rarely do respond to the trust. They rarely disclaim the trust. And if they do respond to the trust, it's never a proper response. However, because we're operating, we express the trust in the law of equity, there is a maxim, which is the trust will not fail for want of a trustee. So let's get back to the digital ID, for example. If I want to protect my freedoms and rights, I would put the digital ID and its data into a private trust. I would then express that private trust to the public agency and appoint them as trustees in the matter to deal with the matter. Now, in accordance with the law of equity, which is doing what is fair and what is right, because that public agency is the only agency that can deal with the matter, because they're the one that's controlling the ID and the data, then in accordance with the law of equity, they must perform their duty as a trustee because they're the only ones that can hold the position. But again, in accordance with the law of equity, and this is a maxim of equity, a trust will not fail for want of a trustee. Even if they don't perform their job as a trustee, the trust still holds, which means the digital ID and the private data that's secured in the trust as private property still holds in a court of law. The
So
terms that, protects it.
I would argue that real sovereignty would just be saying no.
Absolutely. there is that aspect of it, of course. There is the not getting involved in a digital ID. There is the resistance. There is the protesting. There is
But I
everything
mean,
else.
leaving aside any groups or any organizations, just mean like personally, when it comes to, you need to get a digital ID, I will just be saying no and dealing with whatever the consequences may be. That to me, that's sovereignty.
That's an expression of sovereign free will, of course it is, absolutely. However, you mentioned consequences. What are the consequences? Are the consequences where you say no to something and then your prime minister, which he has done, comes out onto his podium and says, well, if you don't get the digital ID, you'll never be able to work?
So
And
be
I
it.
mean,
I do believe the world's going towards that anyway, as I said to you in the emails about my biblical worldview. So I fully believe we're in end time. So I believe there's going to be a time where I'm going to be asked to get something that if I don't get it, I'll not be able to buy or sell. So
yeah.
whatever, bring it on, big boy.
But my question would be then, what happens then if you're not working? What happens if you've got a family?
You
You
die
need,
after a very short period of time, I imagine.
okay, so let's say that that's happening en masse, and let's say that we've got the entire fabric of society is beginning to break down because enough people have woken up that decided they're going to express their sovereign free will and say no.
But I
Where does
don't
that
think.
leave us as a society?
I think as a society we should never be without hope, but I don't feel that we're ever going. If you just look at COVID for an example alone, we're never going to get to a position where enough people are awake to affect change. Most people are
Yeah.
just bots who go along with whatever the current thing is and just change their profile picture to try and affect change.
Yes. Yeah. I understand. What was your experience, Mark, with the COVID? What did you get from all that?
Well, the moment I found out there was supposedly a scamdemic, I just thought, oh, right, this is like communist training. Like stand 2 meters apart. And then I found out about Event 201 that they'd pre planned it and that they'd run
Yeah,
simulations of the exact thing, a SARS virus going
that's right.
worldwide. And then I found out that Fauci, who was the one giving all the directions in America, was financially linked to the Wuhan lab that was the supposed leak. So with these things, as always, if there's like catchphrases lined up like new normal, and if everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet, it's a simulation, folks.
Safe and effective.
Yeah, stay safe. See, if I was told to stay safe one more time, I was ready to punch somebody in the face. Like it was
Do you
very
know what
trying times.
the interesting things during those, because I was, when it hit, when that COVID first hit, I was completely aware of what was going on when it first hit. So I was already clued in. And when I think it was they was going into their second lockdown in London, I decided there and then I was going to have no part of it. And I went straight to the airport, jumped on a plane, flew straight to Sweden, and they was open for business. So every other country was closed down, and Sweden was going about their business as if there was no COVID whatsoever. And I spent 3 months in Sweden just living a completely normal life. And
It's
it just
the
made me, it made me realize just how insane the world is. When you've got
well, we're
countries having,
subject to programming on a daily basis, and like people around me have always wondered like how I'm not affected by programming. Like I genuinely don't watch TV, so I'm not getting the program cues. So when something like this comes along, I am the person standing there going, "Why is everybody getting on like fucking lunatics?" I mean,
yeah,
my own parents didn't want to see their grandkids in fear of getting sick. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
yeah, that's really got you, hasn't it? When you're at that stage with things, yeah,
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
it's proper fear.
It was a very scary time. I mean, when I was going through that, I really did feel alone in my views and my perspective on the world. And it was during that COVID period that I really started to ask the question: I can't be the only one that's seeing this. I can't be the only one that knows what's really going on. There must be other people out there that are thinking exactly the same thing as I'm thinking and seeing the exactly same thing playing out. And that just, initiate my journey further and further into forming a private society, if you like, as a
You
way.
realize you're not, but you're of a very small minority of people that do see things that way. You know, that was the scariest thing for me. Everybody
Yeah,
just jumped in the wagon off, you know, like they were happy to tell on their neighbors, or they were happy to see their friend maybe not get the job because they refused to get a vaccination. I mean, like, where's your morals, people? You know what I mean? It was an insane time.
yeah. It was. People were under threat, under fear, under coercion, under all sorts of nasty things, and most of it was being propagated by the government, that of course were coming out on their podiums on a weekly basis and scaring the jeepers out of everybody with all their charts and their. And the craziest thing was they was doing projections, weren't they? They had a system and they was doing projections where it was going. I was thinking, you're not actually studying real life. You're actually making it all up with
Yeah.
computer simulations of where you think it's going. And just
So
thinking, go on.
the overarching question for me would be, I totally agree with wanting to be abstract from the system that we're born into and contracted into without any, idea of what the terms and conditions are. We're just sort of brought along for the
Yeah.
ride. But I believe that the system is that corrupt that whether you form these societies outside of it or whatever, that they don't give a fuck about equity, though. They don't give, they do whatever they want at the end of the day anyway. If we're going to be moving into tyrannical times, which it certainly seems that that's the way the current government's going. I mean, we've arrested more people for Facebook crimes in Russia this year. Why are they going to stop and go, oh, well, here they've sent a letter to us that we haven't responded to, so that ties us in the contract. They're
Yeah.
not going to operate like that. They're just going to come and lift you if they want to lift you. That's
Sure, I've got to be honest with you, Mark. I'm personally under no delusion. I don't think there's all sunshine and rainbows when you achieve sovereignty, because it isn't like that. Like you just said, you are part of a system that's very corrupt and very deceptive. They want to come after you. They're going to come after you. And a lot of these government agencies and public authorities are violating the very laws that they've sworn an oath to defend and protect and uphold. And they're committing to a degree, committing criminal acts and acting in complete dishonor. So yeah, I agree with you. However, that doesn't absolve us from responsibility or taking the higher road or acting with dignity or acting with honor. I think on a personal level, we still have a duty to maintain honor, to maintain responsibility, to be the exemplar, even when these authorities and these agencies are not. Even if they do come around, with their jackboots and start dragging you out of the house and throwing every charge and claim at you, is to still act in equity and still act in honour throughout the whole process. And I think as long as you do that on a personal level, then you are right within yourself, aren't you? You're right with your creator, you're right with your principles, you're right with your integrity, and you can go to sleep at night.
But how would you be any better off than I would be if I said no to digital ID or you said no to digital ID? Like, how would the outcome be any better for you than it would be for me? Like, what's the benefit of doing
Yeah,
your way?
so let's look at the digital ID, for example. Where can I start with this? So when you become sovereign, you establish a new life as a living man or woman in a new private domain. You then claim and take control of the legal persona, the public persona, the citizen, and you place that into a private trust. And then the digital ID trust that you express is part of the trust that you've claimed as the citizen. And the reason we do that is because to operate in the public domain, in the public venue and jurisdiction, whether that's to gain a public benefit like the National Health Service, or whether that's to start up a business, the only way you can do it is through a registered citizen. And so we still need to use the registered citizen as a proxy for a power of attorney. And the benefit that you would have by going our route with things is that you can still conduct business in the public, you can still earn money, you can still accumulate wealth, you can still own property, and you can still use the digital ID. But the difference is your equity and rights and freedoms are protected by trust law and the law of equity, because you've restructured everything into a trust, as opposed to being a citizen that's gone, you know what, I don't want anything to do with your digital ID. And then all of a sudden you find yourself out of work, you can't earn money, you can't put food on the table, you can't pay
But
your
you're
mortgage, you
lying
can't
to
pay your...
yourself doing it your way, to be honest. You're lying to yourself doing it your way. If you're against something, then you just don't partake in it. You know, why would you tickle the beast if you're not going to join it? Do you know what I mean? You're either against it or you're not. So, you know, if you're against it, you don't partake in it. You don't
Okay,
partake in it and then try and set your own rules, because they're just going to ignore them, you know,
yeah,
regardless of whatever paperwork you send them. You're either
yeah.
partaking in it or you don't.
Well, okay, so let's look at it from a different perspective. The only way out is in. Right? So we go back to the Matrix movies, don't we? And we go back to Neo. The only way out to turn the system is to go into the system and influence it from the inside out. Yeah, because the system is so widespread, so pervasive, so foundational, so well established that, like we just touched on earlier, you're not just going to pop out over this side here and you're all tickety boo in your own private domain and you haven't got to deal with anything going on around there. You've still got to interact with society, because in order for us to, let's say, for example, build a new earth or build a new world paradigm, we need to be able to transfer value out of the current system into a new system that we create that actually benefits and honors humanity. Therefore, we need to go into the system to generate wealth, whether that's financial wealth, whether that's material wealth, so that we can then transfer that wealth over and into our new private domain to build our new world, if that makes any sense. That's
It
why
makes sense.
yeah.
But I
Rather than
would
watching
say,
it all
like, it does all seem like a lot of effort to still be sitting at the same point that I'm sitting at, where if I don't like something, I won't partake in it.
yeah.
And I won't, you know, without being rude, I won't like kid myself by thinking sending off paperwork is going to absolve me from, you know, whatever the rights that I don't like that this is putting upon me, because I've sent them over paperwork that they haven't responded to, that now, you know, ties them to trust law or whatever. But when it comes down to it, we're dealing with a tyrannical government here. They don't give a fuck what paperwork you've sent over or what they haven't responded to. They're going to act how they want to act, because they are the boot on your throat. You know, that it is the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. So then we're faced with two options, then, aren't we? If we get down to the nitty gritty, the basics of it, when it comes to faults, good versus evil, let's say, if we can reduce it down to that. If you're going to take the option of going, well, okay, I'm not going to comply with that, and I'm not going to have any part and participation in that. If the jackboot really starts to push itself down on you, then you're going to find yourself not only out of the system but also on the streets. Then what kind of life is that?
But
What
then
kind of
that's when
life
it
is that?
comes down to actual sovereignty. Then I would argue in that case, I'm more sovereign than you, because I'm prepared to take whatever life throws at me over principle. You know, if the you know, it's a case of being in the world and not off the world. If I don't want to act a certain way, but the system that I'm living within has consequences for that, well, I'll deal with the consequences. You know, that's whatever.
Yeah, I look at it completely different. So we talk about a corrupt system when we talk about a deceptive system, and I think, unfortunately, and I think we're all guilty of this, is that we generalize things. You know, it's them, they, that, and all the rest of it. Where actually, do you know what? It is a bad system and it is dishonorable. But there are actually good people within the system, and I would probably say that there are anywhere between 60 to 80% of the people within this system that are completely unaware of how bad the system is that they're caught within, or they're actually good people stuck within a system where they can't actually bring about their own purpose and intention the way they want to. So I wouldn't say the system was all bad and all evil, and that there is some good that still can be done. There is good that can be salvaged, and it's salvaged through the minds and hearts of people. And the only way we're going to get to the hearts and minds of people is by expressing our views, our perspective, and acting the way that we want to be, in the way that we want to see the world, and the way that we want to change the world, and that we start to influence society from the inside outwards, if that makes any sense. We go through a transformation process. And again, I'm under no delusion. A lot of people go, well, we need to have change within the next 10, 20, 30 years. No, this is going to take hundreds of years. It's going to take thousands, because it took thousands of years to get to where we are now with the current system. Therefore, if good is going to have its day, which it must do, because we're living in a duality reality, right? A polarized reality where we go from one to the other. Then if good is to have its day, then at some point, the world and society is going to transform. Good is going to have its day, and it's going to be an expression through each individual as a person, from their heart, from their mind, from their conscious state. But again, it's going to happen over thousands of years. And I'm placing all my money on the good, that the good wins. And I'm deciding, as well as the other members of our society, we're deciding to play a role in that. We're not going to sit there and say, you know what, I don't want to be part of that, and up yours and all the rest of it. We've decided, you know what, we're going to stand up. We're going to be counted, and we're going to try and do our best to turn this around. Does that make sense?
My point is, I would be standing shoulder to shoulder with you, but I wouldn't need to be a sovereign to do that. If I mean, like, I wouldn't need to be how you would classify a sovereign to be in agreement with what you're saying and to be standing shoulder to shoulder with you. I would just disagree with what, I don't need to go through a process or go through paperwork. I know that I am a sovereign person governed by something higher than myself. So I don't need paperwork for that, and I don't need to go through a process for that.
I agree with you. As an individual, I agree with you completely, and I would be the same as you. But as a society of people, there has to be some form of recognition that we're all part of the same community, and there has to be some sort of a record of what we're doing as a community together.
We get a wee star badge in people's. We get a wee star badge in people's lapels on their pockets. And we'll get like a punch card system, maybe round it up, get them rounded up. But no, look, I fully agree with the ethos and the philosophy of sovereign, and I fully believe I am sovereign. The only place that I differ with you, as I say, is on the structure around it, because I believe sovereignty is a choice and comes from responsibility and accountability, as opposed to form filling and a journey of discovery, or whatever you want to call it. You know where you don't.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I completely agree with what you're saying. On a personal level, sovereignty is something that you just embody and you just express without having to define yourself as being a sovereign. 100%, I'm with you on that. But also, when you're dealing with wanting to separate yourself from a nation state and wanting to rescind and cancel citizenship, then you have no other choice but to go down the route of issuing sovereign documents and going through lawful procedures. And I think if you want to be part of a larger community, if you want to form a new private community, a new private organization, then there has to be a documented record of what you're doing. So a documented record and account.
Couple of questions just before we wrap up. What was your personal journey that led you to going down the formalizing sovereignty?
Crikey, yeah, okay. So I'll go back as recent 10 years ago. 10 years ago, my life was very, very different. I'd lived a very tumultuous adolescence. I got myself into a lot of alcohol and illicit drugs. I was a very egotistical person. I was very much in the system. I was running multiple businesses. I was chasing after money, chasing after wealth, completely asleep at the wheel. And then there was a series of massive life events where my ego began to unwind and unfold because it couldn't handle the life that I was trying to manage. I started to lose things, relationships, property, houses, businesses, money. I did a stint of being homeless on the streets, and I went through a complete dissolution of the ego, dissolution of the identity, an awakening of the soul. Then I went into a process of an awakening to the reality. Then I went on a journey of discovery, of reading, studying, and getting hold of lots of information about the world, trying to figure out what the world was all about. And then that led me on to the journey of sovereignty, which really began to pick up pace when I discovered about the collusion between government and the banking, and when I come to the massive realization that the government was not here for us. and then when the COVID come along, that was just the icing on the cake for me. That was the massive confirmation that I needed that shit, and pardon the French, we are screwed. You know, these people
Don't worry
that
about
are
the language.
these people that are called leaders are incompetent. They're, you know, just absolute imbeciles, stupid. And I'm looking and thinking, I cannot believe that these people were in charge, you know. And when I watched the way people were behaving en masse, and then I that was when I realized we are in major trouble here. And I was doing a lot of finger pointing, Mark. I don't know if you've ever done that. That's not right. There's something wrong with that over there. And why are they doing it like that? And that could be better. And that could be better. And then I just started to turn the finger around at me. What are you going to do about it? Because no one else is doing anything about it. No one else is bringing in a solution. No one else is trying to make things better. So I just pointed the finger at myself. I go, well, it's up to you, buddy. What are we going to do? And that was about 3 or more years ago. I started to have these powerful visions come to me about a society and what that would look like. And it was a process of just gaining the confidence of becoming someone that could create the foundational principles and laws of society. So that's kind of how my journey evolved, and I got to where I am here. So, and I'm still on the journey, Mark. I'm still developing. I'm still evolving. I'm still learning as I go through things. So I don't
That's the
claim to
beauty
know
of
it.
life. It never stops. So, two last questions then. So, second last one, what differs between your movement and the idiots on the free man of the land movement?
Yeah, so we are completely distinct from these, let's say, sovereign citizen movements where people are trying to get away with things. They're trying to get away with unlawful acts. They're trying to challenge and go up against the government, or they're trying to get money out of the system. We're not doing that at all. We're not causing conflicts. We're not causing controversy. We're not going to war with the system. We're going to peace. We are deciding to take the high road. We are not operating in an unlawful state, and we are trying to coexist with the current world whilst trying to establish our own new world paradigm, our new private domain as a private society. That's where we're different. We're acting as exemplars of the law, and we're acting with honour towards our fellow human beings.
Okay. And lastly, then, what lasting change or influence do you aspire to achieve through your work?
Yes, so the work that I'm doing, the legacy that I'm creating, is to not only provide an educational system that enlightens and educates people about the facts and the reality of the world that they live in, but also to create better systems that are going to improve people's lives widespread. So, for example, we're creating what's called a private benefit, which will be our equivalent of a banking monetary system, except where our system won't tax you and won't charge extortionate amounts of interest. And our system is a system where people will actually be able to exchange value, and where everybody gets an opportunity to accrue wealth, and also to create a society that offers widespread peace and prosperity. Because I think for the last 2,000 plus years, we've been living in a world that's been at war, that's been at conflict, whether it's been nation against nation, organizations against organizations, religion against religion, so on and so forth. And so I personally aspire to a world that's functioning on peace and prosperity. Just those two principles: live and let live. Let's all have a great time. And if I can put in place,
I think if
the foundational structure and the systems that
I think everybody
most,
has seen, we would be in a.
yeah. Can you still hear me? Okay, Mark.
I think if we all had the same. You,
Yeah.
hello?
Can you still hear me? Okay, Mark. Yep, I'm here.
You can hear me okay? Yeah.
I can hear you just
Yeah, I can
fine.
hear you. Yeah. So, one last question. If you were to recommend one book, can be related or unrelated to what you're about, what would it be and why?
If I could recommend one book, okay, that's a good question. It's been a while since I've read books, but if I was going to recommend one good book, it would be Man's Search for Meaning, if I remember that rightly, about Victor, I think his name was, who was held in a concentration camp during the World Wars, and he went through the horrors of that, and where he was trying to find meaning through the ordeal of life, the ordeals that he was going through a concentration camp. And that book really brings it home to you, and how you can find meaning even in the worst of circumstances that are upon you. So that book really inspired me. That's the one that comes to mind. Man's Search for Meaning.
Fantastic. And I'm going to link all your website and socials and stuff in the description. So thank you very much for coming on this evening. And yeah, this has been the Belfast Bobcast. So if you could like, share, and subscribe, and if you stay on, it's just there's a bit of a song here on the outro, and that's us.
Done with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent. You won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.
Oh.